Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Sometimes growth involves digging up the dirt and planting anew. So says tonight's guest, Shayne Traviss, who after 20 years of marketing, promoting and producing others, decided to leave the corporate world and set out on a journey of self-discovery, which led him down some unexpected roads. Through bankruptcy, fear, anxiety and love, to heart-rending loss, the founding of a personal development movement that reached millions around the globe, and an invitation to meet face-to-face with the most famous media mogul in the world, self-help guru Oprah Winfrey. And if that sounds a little bit like a fairy tale, well, it's clearly only half the story. Shayne Traviss joins me now to discuss some of his challenging life experiences and how he's used them to learn more about himself and integrate the lessons which he shares in his new book, Your Vivid Life, an invitation to live a radically authentic life. Shayne Traviss, welcome.
Hi, Sandie. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you here, Shayne. Your childhood was extremely challenging. You experienced a lot of abuse and bullying at school, and you tried to take your own life when you were 17. Tell us what life was like for you growing up.
Well, generally, without the influence of others, I was a happy, very happy kid. One of those children that whatever happened the day before, I could wake up the next day and take a new look on life, a new, fresh perspective, ready to go, ready to embrace another experience, ready to forgive, ready to forget. My grandmother always said there was something special about me because I was able to love even in the darkest of moments, even the darkest of people. But when you're around 17, which is the time you speak of, it's both a challenging time for people that are quote-unquote normal, let alone someone that had come from my experiences of having a heroin addict father, growing up with alcoholism and drugs, being surrounded by an abusive parent, bullying, being ostracized, being kicked out, being told by teachers I'd never be this, I'd never be that, because of all the struggles that were going on. I was unable to kind of focus and grasp everything that was going on around me in order to take and utilize what I was learning at that particular time to be what we call success in the world. And so it was like being worn down and worn down and worn down and worn down by every day arriving with a positive attitude and every day being taken down by someone calling me a name or beating me or yelling at me or kicking me out from someone or telling me I wasn't worthy. And so eventually I started to believe it and developed an anxiety disorder, developed depression, and started to go on a downward spiral, ultimately leading to the day I tried to take my own life.
What stopped you? What was it that made you hold on?
It wasn't actually something that made me hold on. It was, I'd say, a force outside of me that knew, or within me that knew it wasn't time. I did take 90 of my anxiety medications, and I woke up in the hospital with charcoal on my lips. So they did use that to remove the poison from my body so it didn't take my life. And so whatever force is at work in the universe must have knew there was something greater for me. And after that day, I had what we would call the beginnings of an awakening, to know that I wasn't going to allow these people to dictate who I was and what my worth was in the world. And so when I left the psychiatric hospital, which I was mandated to stay in after I had tried to take my own life, I just decided to go on a journey of self-discovery and to finding the truth of who I really was and to bringing that into the world with all I had. And, I mean, there were a lot of obstacles along the way, but I had one thing that a lot of people didn't have, and that was courage. And so what I was afraid of, I dove into instead of running away from.
You know, self-worth is an important thread throughout your book. We come back to that again and again and again. And self-worth is something that I think is intricately involved with authenticity. So many people who don't have much self-worth find themselves behaving inauthentically because they're afraid to be themselves. You know, they mould themselves into whatever it is that other people want them to be. And you talk about, you know, your own self-worth many times and how difficult it was to hold on to that. What helped you rediscover your self-worth?
To understand, a lot of the time I spent alone helped me really define my own self-worth and who I was, because I always knew who I was at the core and and how I wanted that to unveil itself in the world. And like you were saying along the line, it was kind of a game of peekaboo, right? It was like I'm coming out as myself and I'm going back because of the reactions and responses from other people. And so when I came to the point to realize as I got older and as I grew within myself, and I still do, realize that other people's opinions of me don't matter. They're projections of their perception. And so and most times they're afraid too. So you might have, or I might have, triggered something in them that they don't want people to see. And so they're trying to, in a way, suppress that in me. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, we're all playing hide and seek, aren't we?
Yeah, we're playing hide and seek with each other, and it's been my life journey to, you know, come out of the closet, so to speak, as myself in whatever situation that I'm in. And if you were to ask anyone in my circle or anyone who I've touched along the way, they would say that, you know, no matter what, I would come out as myself, no matter what it took, no matter if I was being beat down by an adult or whether I was being ridiculed by a peer that was my age or whether I was being judged, I would keep coming back. You know what I mean? It's like a muscle. It's like, okay, you can hit me, but I'm going to get back up. You can hit me again, but I'm going to keep getting back up. And I'm not going to allow you to defeat me and to suppress who I am, because to suppress who I am is more painful than anything that you're going to give me.
Yeah. But you did forge a successful career for yourself. You know, you spent a long time, you know, growing your career, marketing, promoting and producing others. But there was something within that didn't make you happy. What was it that actually made you say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to go and do something else?
I realized that I was hiding my thoughts and opinions and radically authentic self behind the people that I was producing and marketing. And so I was nurturing them to be their most authentic self through whatever program they were offering, whether it was a podcast or whether it was a blog or whether it was a film. And at the same time, I was the one behind the scenes, not really speaking out about what I had to say. And that's what I really wanted to do. But it was kind of like I knew who I was, and I was using kind of like people as puppets. Not using them, that's a bad word, because everything that they had to say was incredible. I mean, on vividlife.me, I produced over 7,000 podcasts of incredible information and conversations with people. I produced over 10,000 blogs, a video series, and so on and so forth. So what they had to say was completely in alignment with what I had to say, but I was always behind the curtain, producing the show. And what I really wanted to be was the one doing it. Not in a sense that
Speaking,
I'm not really the
yeah.
Speaking, I'm not really one who's like a stage kind of speaker, but just like sharing my voice and my authentic self with other people in hopes of inspiring them to do the same. That's what I always wanted to do. And so, over time, over a 20-year career in marketing and producing and editing, I used that channel as a way to get the information that I wanted out there. And then finally one day I was like, this is not what I want to do. I'm doing the same thing as I've always been doing in my life. I've been producing others when really I want to be producing and putting my own self out there. And so go ahead.
I was going to say, there's a little bit of a jump here for me because there was a period in your life when you left behind a successful career, and before you started Vivid Life, when you wanted to be authentic, you didn't want to do that job that you'd been doing for so long, and you courageously left it, but then you faced bankruptcy, and it took a while for you to actually move into Vivid Life, didn't it?
Yeah, so we're back to
What was that period in there like?
Yeah, we're back to hide and seek again. And so it's like I jumped, I kind of came out of the closet, so to speak. I started walking in the direction of doing more and being more of what I wanted to be. And then I kind of, through conditioning and through what I knew every day that I could do, kind of comfortably took the comfortable road and went back into doing the exact thing I wanted to do, not that I wanted to, that I was doing before, but just with another mask, if you know what I mean. So before the mask, before the mask was like the television industry, the mainstream television industry and media, and then I had started sharing my own journey in the personal development world, and then I started doing the same thing that I did in the commercial world for the personal development world. So they were just two different masks. So basically, in this world, I was hiding behind like TV shows and other radio commercial shows, and then I started to come out, and then it's like hide and seek again. I became afraid. I backed up because I didn't trigger. I hate to use the word triggers because has become a very like a common word that people use for absolutely everything now. But around that time, triggers were being hit, and they were causing me to have, I don't want to say I have PTSD because I have not been diagnosed with it, but they were bringing me back to experiences from the past when people started to throw judgments at me, when I started to kind of come out as myself and speak my own opinions and thoughts. They would come directly at me, and it caused me to like remember the pain from the past and kind of back myself back into that space and be like, okay, I'm not going to use my voice again. I'm now going to hide again behind other people's voices that are putting out the information that I want to put out. And then finally, after 10 years of producing vividlife.me, of other people's voices and personal development, I had a breakthrough at actually, which is where I have a lot of my breakthroughs and where I see a lot of breakthroughs with a lot of people, is in a sharing circle where everyone kind of shares. It's facilitated by the facilitator, but everyone kind of shares what's on their heart. And I had another breakthrough that day that I was doing the exact same thing with a different mask. And so at that particular day, I decided, again, to leave another kind of career, per se, behind, and then break out and start sharing my own voice again. And that's when I produced my video series, My Vivid Life, to kind of, behind the scenes, show people experiences that I was having and my perspective on them, and then move that into writing my own blogs, and then eventually my own book, Your Vivid Life, An Invitation to a Radically Authentic Life, to share my journey and the information that I learned as a student of life on my path to radical authenticity, to in some way hope to inspire others to kind of do the same. And the book is kind of positioned in a way of like a self-inquiry. It asks a lot of questions. It shares my story, but it asks a lot of questions and gives a lot of practices so that people can find that space within them.
How hard was it to leave? I mean, Vivid Life became very successful. As you said, there were thousands of blogs, a lot of different shows you were producing. You've got this movement going, probably, possibly successful beyond what you imagined it might be when you started it. How hard was it to turn your back on that?
It was a very emotional process because not only was it something I had been doing for 10 years, but I had built relationships with each person who was either blogging and or hosting podcasts on the network. And so between the emotional cords and attachments that I had with the people and the everyday tasks that I do, and kind of getting my bearings together and collecting, and like I was going through a series of my own working with a psychotherapist, going to barefoot workshops and other spiritual shaman workshops in order to kind of, do the clearing so that I could get to my own voice to speak that. So it was kind of like this multifaceted thing where at the same time I'm letting go and finding my own voice at the same time. So it was kind of, it was a very, very emotional, intense kind of spiritual journey, which involved a lot of clearing, a lot of emotional clearing, a lot of tears, a lot of anger. It was kind of, I would describe it like a tornado that was, wreaking havoc on my life and everything around it at the same time. So I was letting go of this and grasping onto something new. It just became somewhat of a whirlwind until one day it all seemed to calm. And it was all around the time where I was spending a lot of time at a place called the Hive Center, not far from my home. And I was doing a lot of connecting with nature and barefoot walking in the woods. And so that solitude brought me to a place of clarity and peace, where I was able to, move through and facilitate this journey in a calmer way. Like, I don't know if it's a quote when they say, let muddy water settle and everything becomes clear, right? And so until I was brave enough to stand alone by myself, to be with just myself in a place of solitude, everything was just chaotic because I didn't allow the muddy water to sit long enough to get clear. And once I found my place of solitude in the woods, barefoot, I was able to get to that space and finally hear my own voice and have that sense of clarity of what I wanted to say. And that's when the whole journey of the book began.
I'm going to come back to that in a minute, Shayne. It's time for us to go to the break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. My guest tonight is author and authenticity advocate Shayne Traviss, who founded vividlife.me, a personal development movement that reached millions around the globe. We're discussing his newly published book, Your Vivid Life. We'll be back with more from Shayne Traviss after this break.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
I'm Fidel Nshambo. I was born in a city called Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America and all your problems are done, they don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Shayne Traviss, before the break, you were talking about this maelstrom of emotion, that burst forth from you around that time when you decided to leave vivid life as it was behind and turn it into something different. I'm curious to know, because I think it's a not uncommon story for people these days to have these breakthrough moments where they understand that the life they're living is not the one that they truly want to be living, and yet to turn their back on what they know is one of the scariest things that we can possibly face, and to walk into the unknown. Was there a moment in that where you just wanted to say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to go back to what I know. It's too scary. It's too frightening. Were you tempted not to move forward?
There were so many of those moments, and actually there were even moments like recently where I go back and I think that I kind of miss it. You know what I mean? I miss the people. I miss the volume of work. But then I realized that it wasn't. That was my purpose at that particular time on my journey, and this is my purpose now. And that everything that I learned from that, and everything that anyone who is following learned from that, contributed to who I am and who they are today. And so now I'm on to my next experience, which is giving the book as a gift and getting it out there for people to, take a look at themselves and to find that place of radical authenticity within them, so that they can birth that purest self and give that to the world with all they've got. And sometimes you think or you believe that that's what you're doing, but unless you take a really deep look, unless you be still and know, so to speak, you don't really hear that. You don't really know that true voice, because we're kind of going around like puppets with strings, and each one of those strings is something we'll say like a string of conditioning, where we believe that we're supposed to be doing something versus doing something that we actually want to do. It's like if we go back to public school, like in all reality, most of the careers that were presented to us were doctor, lawyer, nurse, policeman, fireman. You know what I mean? Like the traditional roles. And so we go about our lives conditioned to believe if we're not doing those things, right, then we are not valuable. And so, in a sense, we fall into the closest one that fits with us in order to be valued and seen in the world as valuable. And so, unless we take a look at ourselves and find out what we really want to do. I mean, I remember maybe in grade 7, I think, a little girl saying she wanted to be an artist. And then it brings me back to experience I had in South Africa about 4 years ago, when here we are again with that school-aged child around a circle being asked what they wanted to do when they grew up. And every kid was like, doctor, lawyer, doctor, lawyer, doctor, lawyer, doctor, lawyer, doctor, lawyer. Literally, it was only doctor, lawyer in a rural South African village. And one little girl named Grace stood up and said, I want to be an artist. And everyone started to stare at her. And so at that particular point, it was an uncomfortable, you could feel the uncomfortability in the air about what are you doing? Like you are outside the norm. You're supposed to be one of these things. This is what we do here, right? And so that's what we call conditioning. And so at that particular point, this little 7 to 9-year-old girl could kick herself back into a place of resistance and think, well, no, I'm not supposed to be an artist. That's something that I do as a hobby. I'm supposed to be one of these things because that's what we do here, which would be conditioning. And she had the courage to stand up and say, I'm an artist. And so it brings me back to my own experiences as a child when either you heard these things out loud or these things were being fed to you through the media, that this is the life that you want. These are the things that are important. Do you know what I mean? Like you want the 2.2 kids and the white picket fence and every house has to look the same and we're getting these cupboards and these floors. And even now in 2019, it's the same thing. Like we outside the cookie cutter villages of people that are all living these lives, buying to do the freedom to do what they really want later. And I know, particularly through my own experiences of loss and grief, that we might not get the opportunity to do it later. And so that also really shook me up to say, I need to do what I want to do. I need to do me now because I'm not going to get another opportunity. I might not have tomorrow. And so I need to muster up in some way, shape, or form the courage to push against that resistance, whether it's voices of other people telling me that it's wrong or it's right, and let them know that, you know, their opinions of me and what I'm doing are not my truth. They're also just their conditioning. And sometimes when you get to that point where you realize that, you make people uncomfortable around you because you have created a world of people that are similar to that vibration that you were giving off. And so they start to be uncomfortable, and things and people start to fall away from you, and that could also cause resistance and be really scary for you because like my world as I know it is falling apart. These people that I grew up with and knew, they're no longer relating to me, and so my relationships are dwindling, and now I'm all alone, and I have two choices here. Either I can go back into that quote-unquote normal life and be back with the normals, or I can be alone. And the key is you're never alone if you like the person you're alone with. And so the most important thing is to work on yourself, to keep nurturing and developing yourself through practices of solitude, which are meditation. I mean, there's different practices in many countries. I reference to them in my book. Some of them have been extremely effective for me and other people, but it's all about getting still enough to just know who you are in every given moment and have the courage to break through the resistance to be that no matter what's pushing against you. Because there's always going to be something or someone or some thought or some conditioning that's going to be coming as resistance to push against you from being yourself. Believe me, the more you're yourself, the more you have things pushing against you, and you need to have the power to break through that, or else you're always going to be but a puppet that's picked up and put down as others desire. And I don't find that there's joy or happiness there. I find that it leads to a mundane, cookie-cutter, 9-to-5 kind of experience where I'm just working to exist. And I don't want to work to exist. And I don't think anyone wants to work to exist. I think everyone wants to thrive in this life, both, spiritually and intellectually and financially. And we can do that. If everybody is being a version of someone else, then how are we ever going to break through to anything different than what we have? And I think that's really that's really a struggle, and that's really what's going on right now. Everything is being, topsy-turvy, so to speak. Everything is being flipped up and flipped under at this particular point in our transition in time, and it's making everyone uncomfortable. And so there's this battle going back and forth between going back to the old and pressing forward to the new. And it's happening individually and collectively, and we can feel that in the world right now. And I think that our mission should be to push through that and to be as best as we can be our radically authentic selves in a world that is not really nurturing to that right now. And if I'm doing that, I'm in essence inspiring and giving other people permission to do the same.
I do love that phrase, be yourself, everyone else is taken. And you're absolutely right. I think what we are seeing is the dismantling of all of those structures that have kept so many of us in these little cages, if you like, of conformity. We've only got to look at the way, society is structured, the way school is structured. We're made to conform every step of the way. I'm very curious to know, when you started doing your web series, you started travelling and you started interviewing people and asking questions, talking to advisors and experts and therapists and guides. It was as if you were going on a kind of walkabout quest to learn more. Who in that period inspired you the most, or what experience inspired you the most?
One of the most profound experiences I had was actually the first episode that I worked on, which was an equine therapy session that I had with a woman named Jennifer Schramm. I had experienced equine therapy in a group in Sedona, Arizona, with a woman named Tara Shad. And through that experience in Sedona, I ended up meeting the woman named Jennifer Schramm, who was actually from Canada, close to my home. And I had kind of a mini breakthrough experience in the Sedona. And so I wanted to do this work further. And so at this particular point, I brought a camera crew with me so that they could film this experience, so that they could see my questions for the therapy and my breakthroughs and transitions that I had during the therapy. And that particular episode and the work that Jennifer Schramm does, actually the work that the horses do, actually the work that we all do together, was probably one of the most profound understandings and shifts on my entire journey thus far, besides the barefoot walking in the woods. Again, it's all with nature and animals. Those are my things that seem to bring me the most powerful messages. And what I got from that message and from that horse, you can go and watch that video on my website, vividlife.me, is that horse mirrored to me that I never felt supported, that I never felt like anyone had my back. And it gave me the breakthrough realization that it's actually never going to happen. At the end of the day, just like your worthiness is not an outside thing, your security is also not an outside thing. And as long as we're looking outside for what's inside, we're always going to be struggling, because everything that we're looking for is within. All of the answers are within. And that's why self-inquiry, I would call my religion, because I come to a space when I am stumbling with an answer, I ask question after question after question after question of myself. I be still until I know. And then when I know the answer, I act from that space. That's even in my relationships as well, because in our relationships, we can kind of get into emotional ping pong, right? When we get into, say, an altercation or a discussion or conflict with others, we start to hit each other's triggers. And so we react as opposed to respond to each other from our conditioning and from our emotional wounds. And if we get still enough to give ourselves the space to come from conscious action as opposed to reaction, then we can really start communicating on the vibration of truth. What is it we really want to communicate, right? And so unless we get still enough to listen to that, we will never have the types of relationships that grow into the beautiful relationship that I actually have today. I have a 22-year relationship with my husband, which has had its bumpy roads, but the more we come from conscious action versus reaction, the more vibrant we become individually and collectively, because when we're operating from radical authenticity, from our deepest truth, everything just works out. It's like, and it becomes like a ripple effect in your life. Everything starts starts to come together. Even your finances begin to raise, like almost miraculously, because you're living in a space of truth. And I think, like, when you take steps towards, I don't know if this makes sense, but tell me if this makes sense. If you take steps towards the universe takes steps towards you. And in that space of union is where your authenticity comes from. And when you're in alignment with yourself and the universe, everything just works out the way it's supposed to be. And that may sound very metaphysical, very woo-woo, but to me, that's just how it's worked out. When I am deeply in alignment with who I am, when I am speaking my truth from the core, when I'm coming from conscious action, everything just seems to work out.
Yeah, everything flows. Tell me, how does one train oneself out of reaction? You know, the thing about conditioning is that most of us don't know that we're conditioned. And, you know, as you mentioned the word triggers, we have this almost stimulus response thing going on, and we're often completely unaware of it. What advice do you offer to train yourself out of reaction so that one can take that step back, be more aware of what is going on, and be cognizant of how to respond rather than react?
It's like when you're a child and you put your hand on a hot stove and you learn that it burns, right? If you learn that this behavior is always burning you, there needs to come a point where you need to ask yourself, how can I change this in order so I'm not consistently getting burned, so to speak? Do you know what I mean? So it's like, if all of my relationships are failing, why are they failing? If every interaction I'm having with people is conflict, why is it conflictual? If everything I'm doing is not working out, why is it not working out? So for me, it comes back to self-inquiry or meditation for practical practice. It comes back to getting into that space where we're still enough to hear the truth of the answer, right? So if I was to use an argument with your spouse or your parents or your child as an example, I would say to realize when you're starting to get heated and give yourself the space to step back from it, to just say, hold off. I'm going to, take a breather here, and I'm going to, calm myself from the reactionary state and really kind of get a grasp through my own self-inquiry and reflection of what it is that I really want to say to you, right? And all of us just want to be heard, and so that's the problem. And so when we're in a conflict, we're actually not hearing each other. We're just speaking at each other and as opposed to listening to each other. So if we can take a step back and listen to ourselves first, to what it is we really want to communicate, not from our triggers, not from our conditioning, but what is it we really want to communicate to each other. And in the end of the day, I mean, Oprah did, 35,000 interviews, and she said at the end of the day, everyone just wanted to be seen, right?
Yes.
And so they just want to be seen.
Everybody just wants to be seen. Yeah.
Everyone wants to be seen, and everyone wants to be loved. And so if we can really understand that at the core of our communication, people just want to be heard. So that was one thing that I really learned, that, first of all, listening. Listening is so crucial. And most importantly, listening to yourself and listening to your truth, and not reacting from your triggers, but responding from your truth, and listening to other people and their truth. I find if you just listen to other people, you will actually hear what they have to say, as opposed to reacting to triggers. Do you know what I mean?
I'm going to hold you there, Shayne. We have to go to break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with author Shayne Traviss, whose new book, Your Vivid Life, uses his life experiences to demonstrate how we can all live a radically authentic life. We'll be back with more from Shayne Traviss after this break.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the Internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me, and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Shayne Traviss, before the break, we were talking about reaction and response and stepping back and being able to just be with yourself, you know, before you react. Now, in your book, you talk about in your yoga training, you learned a technique that allows one to detach from one's attachments. Can you tell us what that technique is?
Are you referring to three-part breath? It's like a three-part breath.
Very possibly.
Yeah, in yoga I learned something called, well, in yoga they call it Durga Pranayama, which is breath work or three-part breath. And it's a series of breath work that I do and practice quite frequently that gets myself, that actually helps me instantly get out of a state of reaction and into a state of awareness by just really connecting with my breath, by closing my eyes and taking a deep breath in, deep into my belly, like very slowly, and then allowing that out. And then on the next breath, I bring that more up into my chest, allow my chest to expand, and then I breathe that out. And on the next breath, I bring it up into my heart space, and I allow that to be breathed out, and then I repeat that until I feel everything about my being calm, from my physical self to my spiritual self. And most times it can even take 90 seconds to 3 minutes, and you're in a state where you are, per se, calm. And so when you're in that state of calm, you're able, like we were talking about before the break, to come from a place of conscious action versus reaction, because now you're calm, you're not reacting from your triggers, and you're able to communicate, both with yourself and with others, what it is, what's the core intent of what you really want from this. And when we can get to the core intent of what we really want for ourselves and from others, then we can really begin to live out that radically authentic life. And like I said, and from there it creates a ripple effect. And everything gets better.
It's really important, isn't it, to have a technique when one gets to the point where you understand certain patterns that you have and your intention is to break them, to have some techniques to help you. You talked about saying, what is it you really want? Often what happens when we react is the very thing that we don't want to happen,
yes,
because we lose our ability to be rational at those moments.
Yes.
So developing those little techniques that allow you to give yourself that few minutes, or few seconds even, to just break that pattern, not react, and do something different so that you can develop that awareness. What are the techniques? Sorry?
We want to be heard, per se.
Yes.
And if we react at someone, or yell at someone, we're actually not being heard. We think we're being heard because we're raising our voice, but what we're actually doing is hitting triggers in them, and they're just reacting back at us, and it becomes a game of emotional ping pong. But if we get to the state, like if you use a practice like 3-part breath to get to the state of clarity, you will be heard when you're coming from a space of purest of core intention and not from a space of reaction.
Yeah. You know, the book is split into 3 sections, and each section focuses on a key lesson and key qualities, and each chapter within each section on a key quality that relates to the lesson. And every chapter includes practices, tools, and techniques. How challenging was it for you when creating this book to get it organized in a way that you could really focus on key qualities and key lessons? I mean, was that a difficult process? Did it take an awful lot of thinking about?
Each chapter was like a book unto itself. And so I really just got focused on, again, into the space of what I was going to be writing about. And the whole kind of thing is that metaphysically, everything that I was writing about started coming up very intensely while I was writing about it. And so while I was writing about it, all of the conditioning was coming up, all of the resisting, all of the triggers, like I've been speaking about, it all came up. So it actually gives me the kind of fertilizer to be able to nourish the words that I was putting through the book because I was experiencing it as I was writing it. So it's kind of like an incredible journey. I mean, my publisher at that particular time, Joe Lau, was incredible at being able to really work with me and know who I was and help, hold up that mirror and shine it back to me and help me map that out and facilitate it in a way that I could present it to people so that it made radical sense to them. Do you know what I mean? So it's really like, for me, a book is really quite a marriage between everybody that's working on it, between the publisher and the editors and it's all trying to, like, it's like working on a symphony. You know what I mean? It's like everything has its part in order to make the symphony in the end. And so really, they're my words, but they were all guided and nurtured along the process by everybody that I worked with, and then by all the experiences that I was having during the process, and able to facilitate it in a way that, became the invitation that it is.
Did you feel, I mean, when you used a lot of your own life experiences, obviously we learn best from our own life experiences. When you're writing about them, like therapy, you're reliving those experiences. Your cellular memory, is being triggered in many respects. Did you find that challenging? Did you find yourself almost going back into old patterns, or did you find yourself able to detach and go, there's that pattern, and isn't it interesting that I'm not reacting in the same way?
With every chapter came an immense amount of resistance, and the resistance actually became part of the process. And once I broke through the resistance and started putting pen to paper, yes, you're right, I did start reliving the experiences, and I gave myself the space. I gave myself a lot of space to write this book. And in between, there was a little bit of a break when my brother passed away, and I gave myself the space to process that, which ended up birthing 2 chapters in the book. And so what I attribute to the wisdom within the stories and to my own healing is the fact that I allowed everything that I was writing about in the book, I allowed myself to do and be while I was writing it. So if my practice was about giving myself space and triggers and things started to come up for me about what I was writing about, I then in turn gave myself the space. Right? So I was like literally practicing my book while I was writing it. Even still, I actually have read my own book 9 times. So my book, I didn't only write for each one of you. I actually wrote it for myself as well.
For yourself.
And so I go back to that book all the time and look at the practices and use them. And when I get in a space of coming from conditioning, I go and I read the sections in that book that I wrote. Those words, every word that I wrote for everyone, I also wrote for me. And so I'll probably keep reading the book. The book for me is my own guide, right? It's my own agenda. I look at it in some
your
way,
own workbook
every day. Yeah, it's my own workbook. And so that's the workbook and that's why for me it's not about and it's very key when I say I'm a student of life. I don't act as a teacher, I don't act as a guru. I'm a student here. And so I am every day in every way I'm learning and growing just like each one of you. And so I'm not claiming to have the truth. The book was written in a way as an invitation to find your own truth. You know what I mean? And so every time I look at it, I'm seeing something new myself.
Now, when
it's kind
you
of a book that you would, it's kind of a book that you read over and over and over again because every time you see and find something new.
Yeah. I just want to go back to the height of Vivid Life in its previous incarnation. That brought you a friendship with Oprah Winfrey. How influential has Oprah Winfrey been for you in your journey? What have you learned from her?
Oprah Winfrey and the conversations of Super Soul Sunday have been like a cup of tea to me. She's having the kinds of I feel that we really learn through conversation. I said earlier about the group sharing circle. I really feel that by sharing our truths, by having conversations with each other about our truth, the conscious conversations, that really helps us to heal ourselves and in turn creates a ripple effect that helps heal other people. And so the fact that she's actually having these conversations and like we're having this conversation today, from her perspective and from her position of power is what most inspired me. And the fact that she herself is living in her radically authentic life and inspires me to do the same. And that she also shares the reality of it, the fumbles and the falls. And you would think that after a 25-year stint as the biggest talk show host in the world, it would automatically be a given that her network would become successful, right? And then it did not. And so she, kind of fumbled and shared that journey with us in a raw and vulnerable way. And personally, the friendship has been very important to me, not just because of who she is, but because of what she is. And because of what she's giving to the world and in turn giving to me is a permission card to have the kind of conversations that we need to create a more conscious world. I've been with her a few times in person, and as much as she radiates that through media, she radiates that in her presence as well. It's just pure authenticity. There are so many people that she knows and in her presence, and to remember your name when you see her, that's a big deal. That really shows that she's listening. And we've talked several times about that she's listening, that she's paying attention, that she's present, right? Presence is so important, that we're present to each other and present with ourselves. And the only way we can get to that space is by being still and knowing who we are and giving that to the world with all we've got and everything we do. And I really think she is a very powerful example of that.
Vulnerability. I think that's the one of the things that you haven't used that word, but that's what I'm taking from this.
100%.
Honest, open conversation, allowing yourself to be vulnerable, showing that you don't have all the answers, but you're willing to listen and learn from others.
Taking the mask off, really, and letting everyone see who you are. And you know what? There will be people who take advantage of it, and those are just not your people. You you surround yourself with the people who build you up. You surround yourself with people who want to have the deeper conversations that'll take you both higher, and not the people that use them to manipulate you to make you feel lower. And, I've had those people in my life. And, you get better at it. Again, it's listening to your voice. Oprah always says, there's one thing that she said that always stuck with me was listen to the whispers, because they start out as whispers. And if you listen to the whispers, you'll be able to figure it out far before they become screams, and far before they get to the level where they become so damaging that it takes an immense amount of strength and courage to work through it. And that's with people, that's with places, that's with experiences. In every given moment, we have the opportunity to listen to the whispers of, for lack of a better word, soul. Not lack of a better word, soul. The jury's out on actually what that is and what that means, and that's something different, spirit, soul, to everyone. But just to listen to the whispers of your own inner, radically authentic voice. Like, just give yourself permission to cut the strings of conditioning and go into a space, wherever that space is for you, whether it's through meditation or walking in the woods. For me, meditation is a means of understanding, if that makes any sense. It doesn't necessarily mean like sitting on the floor,
and
crossing your legs.
I'm going to have to leave it there, Shayne. I'm really sorry to cut you off. I was going to ask you to give us one final piece of advice, but you've actually summed it up beautifully in what you've just said. Shayne Traviss, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Sandie.
Thank you. Your Vivid Life, an invitation to live a radically authentic life by Shayne Traviss, is published by Watkins. For more information about Shayne and his journey and what he's doing, visit vividlife.me. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to being with you at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.